Hello everyone, it's so good to be with you again. I'm absolutely delighted and I'm thrilled that you have chosen to listen to this upload. If you're listening to me for the first time, you won't know that I have been offline for a couple of weeks. I have been uploading fairly regularly before then, but so much has happened. I have been absolutely astonished by the ways in which what I talk about on this channel, all the good things that I talk about on this channel, have been played out in my life in really unexpected ways. And I do see that. I'm so full of gratitude, and I see that as my reward, if you like, for sharing this information with you. My best friend said to me yesterday, you've got to start talking about some of the stuff that's happening. Maybe I will, I don't know. You know what it's like when you get something special happen, you kind of want to keep it to yourself. But anyway, as I say, I'm absolutely delighted to be with you in this upload. In this succinct presentation, I'm going to be talking about the statements we make about God when we look in the mirror. I do want to say that I am recording on my phone again. I hope to have that all sorted out by next week when I'm set up in my new space. So hopefully this will be the end of the recording on the phone. There may be another one, just depends how things go. But if you hear any noises in the background, please do ignore those. So to get into the upload, I've got my notes in front of me and I'm ready to go. I want to do this in one take because I've got a lot to do today. Statements in this context I am using as a metaphor for our self-concepts and so forth. And I will explain a little bit more about this later. And mirror in this context, I'm using as a metaphor for either the figurative, so the mirror of your introspection and contemplation, as well as the literal mirroring, referring to what it is you see and more importantly feel when you look at your physical self and your surroundings and environment, which includes all relationship dynamics. So just to get into flow here, I think it's important for me to mention from now that we make statements on the level of consciousness just as we do in the human realm. So just as we use statements to make a communication, a declaration of facts that sets forth all of the particulars of something, we're doing that with God. We're making singular and separate assertions that when received by consciousness are physicalized. And I will explain why this nature of statements on the metaphysical side is so significant later. Unlike human statements, though, our spiritual statements are never ambiguous. They're never challenged. They're accepted as the products of the state of consciousness, or in easy speak, they are the defining features of your psychology. And I think that this is an important distinction. As Neville Goddard tells us in his writing, all impressions are an immediate fact in consciousness. And so when through feeling you make a particular statement, it doesn't go away. It sets in motion the construction of a corroborative physicality. And so just think about that for a moment. Sometimes we think a statement is throwaway. In the realm of the wondrous, there is no such thing as a throwaway statement. I'd like to really kick things off by reading from the teachings of Neville Goddard, who speaks about the mask that God wears. And the following passage is taken from Yours for the Taking, what a beautiful title, dated 1967, which you can read for yourself online, completely free of charge. Although I do encourage people to buy books when they can. There's something really magical about the intimacy of the written word when you're holding a book in your hand, or an e-reader if you prefer. Ultimately, just owning a text, I think, enhances your relationship to it. So Neville says, quote, "Called upon to look for the cause of creation, what are you doing losing yourself in the phenomena of life? When something happens, search your thoughts and you will discover your own wonderful human imagination to be the cause of your experience, because God is a person. At the present time, he is wearing a mask called Neville, but the one speaking to you now knows himself to be the Ancient of Days. Every being in the world is a mask worn by God, for housed in man is man's imagination." Human, obviously, he doesn't mean man in along gender lines. I continue. Neville says, "A thought acted upon is an imaginal act. Imagine a horrible earthquake and God will give it to you. Think of a war and God will provide that too. Imagine peace and you will have it. God will give you health if you will but imagine being healthy. Imagine success and you will have it. The moment you think, you are feeding your imagination, which is a person. I use the word person deliberately, for you are a person. You are the mask God is now wearing. For God became you that you may become God. End quote. I'm using what I've just read to really set the tone of this presentation. I said earlier that what we see when we look at ourselves in the mirror, figuratively or literally, produces the statements we're making about God, which Neville backs up here. And do you see how looking at your humanity, your human face, as a mask worn by God transforms your relationship to yourself, to ourselves, and our lives? In his lecture, Your Husband, dated 1968, Neville Goddard said, I quote, "When you give yourself completely over to the gospel story, you are ready, and God will assume the mask of the one who is expressing it at the moment. Then you will have union with that being and bear the child." End quote. It's this union that sets us on the path homeward, the path we take through the life stories we're mandated to tell. And it's this union that makes the statements we're making so essential to us in the drama we've been drafted to participate in. So let's talk about the statements then in the context of trying to manifest something. And I'm making air quotes. You can't see me, but I am. I really struggle with that word now. But anyway, let us say that you're trying to bring about a new relationship. And I use that example because I'm asked about relationships quite often. And ultimately, for many people, they've tried to bring about a relationship and it hasn't worked. So my answer is the reason it hasn't worked in a nutshell is because that relationship that you're trying to bring about translates to a sequence of statements to consciousness. And that sequence of statements that you're making about this relationship, that sequence does not align with the statements you are making about or with the broader context of your life. So remember, everything we communicate, everything we communicate to consciousness through feeling, including our statements, are instructive. Remember what I said, what statements are. They are singular and separate assertions of fact which set forth the particulars of a thing. That's what a statement is, spiritually. And so when you're making statements, they are instructive. You're telling consciousness what shape to take. And so if that input to consciousness is jumbled, the output is going to be a reflection of that. So think about all of the times you've had a conversation with someone or you've listened to something and what you've heard made no sense to you. There would have been little or nothing that you could have done with that information. And that's exactly what happens with consciousness. Because remember, consciousness has no agenda. It is neutral. It just fulfills our every instruction faithfully to the minutest detail. All of that being said, it is entirely possible to overcome this particular limitation, this sort of mismessaging or misalignment. In fact, overcoming it is part of the wider educative experience we're all going through as life. The main cause of the misalignment of statements is an initial misinterpretation of the transmission you received from consciousness in the first place. So using this relationship again as an example, if the message from consciousness to you was, I have given you a new relationship, do you consent? And your response is, I want a new relationship, why can't I have the person I want? Which is what we say with our feelings, right? Then the statements misalign and nothing can happen until that changes. And this is the case for any and everything. The transmission from consciousness to the human aspect must be interpreted correctly. This cannot be done logically, though. You cannot, using your human faculties, know exactly what is being transmitted. You must hand over control to your dimensionally greater self, which speaks spirit. It speaks the spiritual language of emotion. And so when you find yourself wanting something, recognize that your human aspect is trying to rationalize and interpret the transmission logically for you, which is something it cannot do correctly. Remember, we are subject to judgments as human beings. And so any transmission we receive will be tainted by that. So instead of allowing yourself to be swept away by this feeling of wanting, this misinterpretation of wanting, get excited about what you're feeling. Ask your dimensionally greater self to transmit to you what you should do with the information. How should you react and so on? You could even ask to be told what the feeling means, which I think is best, which is something I do all the time. What does this mean? Let me know on the human side as well. And so I feel better about consenting, so it's easier to consent. And know that when you feel uneasy relative to a desire, you are rejecting the transmission. But when you're excited, you're happy, at peace, and so on, you are consenting to it. So as I always say, be feeling led. There's another key point to make here, and that pertains to the statements we make when we let our guards down. Back when I used to try to manifest isolated things, I found that at the point of making that decision to manifest something, as it were, I would think about my objective in a certain way. I'd be really focused and really committed to what I was doing in that moment. And I would think carefully in that moment about my beliefs and so on, because I didn't want anything to interfere with the outcome I wanted. But what would happen as the day wore on is that my default feelings and beliefs and so on would surface. My default responses and reactions would surface. And very often I'd leave that to run unchecked. And this would go on until I remembered that I was trying to manifest something, and I'd check it back in with that. And I'd be thinking, okay, why is it taking so long? Why hasn't it shown up yet? So later, as I gave this sort of thing up, this sort of trying to manifest things in isolation, I found that time spent in self-observation, which is something I talk about in my new course, which launches in December. This isn't a plug. I'll talk about that separately. But self-observation, Neville talks about that a lot. I talk about that in the beginning of Infinite Possibility. When I started to do this a lot, in the way that Neville prescribed particularly, it revealed that contradictory statements about what I wanted and what I had, what I was, were at play. So when what I tried to manifest didn't show up, it was a result of these contradictory statements being made. And I'm so sorry, I can't remember right now where I read or heard this, although I'm pretty sure it's from Neville. And it's where he spoke about the garden that's left to grow wildly. I'm not going to quote him or anything because I won't get it right. But he was talking about this wild garden being like our mind. And this is the sort of thing that goes on with us as human beings. So when it comes to manifesting, we're focused on this one thing that we're trying to do or bring about, and we find ourselves ignoring the broader context. Neville says that we are not careful enough about our mental diets, our attitudes, our moods. So do bear that in mind. Don't think about your manifestation not working, but think about the context of your life and how your objective and your present reality aligns. And then what you're going to find is that you will probably need to be someone else. You will probably need to assimilate a new psychology in order to come into alignment with what it is you want. But that's not difficult. That's where the techniques of prayer come in to assist us until we are able to use the spiritual language of emotion effectively. So if you want to change what you're saying, if you want to change your statements, you have to first become aware of what you're saying. And this takes a real investment of time. The best time to do this actually is perhaps before you go to sleep, because then your dimensionally greater self can reveal to you what you really believe, what you really think about yourself, what you think about the world and so on, what you really feel, if I haven't said it already. And it can do that in an uninterrupted way. And also you're in the optimal state to receive those transmissions. So I said that's perhaps the best time. I would say it is the best time to do this. So what you're going to do as you're going to sleep is just ask your dimensionally greater self to transmit all of the statements to you. These are the source and substance of your existence, of your life, really. Okay, so these statements are the source and substance of you. And what will happen the following day after you do that is that you will become reflective in an almost involuntary way. Now, Neville warns us that this deep reflection can frighten us or discourage us, because he says that we will discover our deceptions and our failings. And that's something that a lot of us run away from. But I encourage you to be strong, push through. I ran away a few times in the beginning, but I decided I wanted to change more than I wanted to stay as I was. So push through, be strong. Don't shy away. Remember, this is an entirely private exercise. Nobody knows what's going on with you, only you. And the beautiful thing is that it's the key to your liberation. So I know some people will ask, what do I do? What kind of state do I get into? You're just relaxed as normal. But this is a kind of ordinary conversation you can have with your dimensionally greater self as you're going to sleep. You're not thinking about anything in particular. You just say, transmit to me, reveal to me, show to me what it is I really think, what it is I really feel, and so on. And so you will get this information. It will happen in stages. That's to say, your dimensionally greater self won't necessarily reveal everything on the first night, but as things surface the following day, just acknowledge. Say, I acknowledge that this is me right now. And what that shows is that you're not resisting what you're being shown. And when you do that, it instantly reduces the hold of that thing on you. So when stuff comes up, you're not going to do anything other than to say, I acknowledge that. And by acknowledging, these are the intricate relationships between what we say and how consciousness works. I wish I had time to go into it today. I don't. But that's all you need to do. As something comes up about a belief that you hold, just acknowledge that that's you. This is not about judgment. This is not about you being a good or a bad person. Just acknowledge it and instantly loosen its grip on you. That's all you have to do. And then become aware, as you go through the course of the day, of the new expression awaiting physicalization by you by switching to your subjective vision. So if you need to close your eyes to do that, you can do that. Make sure it's safe and convenient and all of that. But all you're doing is going from physically looking at your environment, your physical environment, to looking at your mental environment. And we've all done that. We can be looking at something physically, but we're miles away. So that's what you're doing. You're switching from the physical or the objective vision to the subjective, the spiritual. Okay. And then when you see something that pleases you, this is the awesome bit. This is all you have to do. Speak the language of consent so you feel happy and excited when you see something that pleases you. And if you need help, ask your dimensionally greater self for it. That is the only source of help you need. So you can say, transmit the feelings of consent to me. If you're feeling that, okay, you're seeing something that makes you feel happy, you see something that looks amazing, but you don't know that you can consent to it, just ask, transmit the feelings of consent to me, and then go about your day as normal. But just be aware of these consensual feelings. The more you are aware of them, the more intense they become. And you will find, as you repeat this cycle, that what comes up each time as you go to bed aligns more closely with what you want in terms of your whole life ideal expression. And this isn't going to take years. You will instantly start to derive the benefits of submitting to the experience that God now wants to experience as you. And this is always going to be far superior to anything a human mind can put together. And there it is. This isn't a transaction. This is nothing to do with you doing A and getting B. This is about bringing your human aspect under the control of your dimensionally greater self, which itself aligns with God. And I am always asked, how many times should I do this? My answer is, on this occasion, and on all occasions actually, you take control, take the lead. You decide. As human beings, we cannot know what our subconscious operations are. We certainly can't know that for each other. They are too vast. This is so intimate, so personal. I've given other exercises to help us excavate and dig deep into the recesses of our emotional reservoirs, but they are infinite by virtue of the substance of which we are made. And so it is only your dimensionally greater aspect that can know the true extent of things for you. So make your human life a reflection of the real authority. Don't limit yourself to what your human senses evidence. Be circumspect about the statements you are making at all times, and consent to be the experience that God himself wants to have. Until we are together again, stay phenomenally you.